Cleveland Browns quarterback situation is I think it's time for the Browns to do something with Kenny Pickett here, trade him or whatever. But Kenny Pickett sitting out of the Browns will not play in the Browns' final preseason game against the Rams due to his hamstring injury. He's had some reps in practice, but he's not going to be suiting up for they're calling it a dress rehearsal, so to speak, in the Browns' final preseason game. What are your thoughts on the Browns' quarterback situation as a whole, starting with Shedeur Sanders, et cetera? I want to get your perspective on it. What do you think?
I know that they've named Joe Flacco the starter. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan. I understand why, because you're coming into a new season. You're dealing with a bunch of rookie quarterbacks, and that's understandable. If you're Coach Kevin Stefanski, you want to go with someone that's a little bit more seasoned and has more experience. But I think that what you've seen in Shedeur Sanders, like granted, obviously he's dealing with the oblique injury. He's going to still be able to get some playing time on Saturday in the final game. But what we saw from him against Carolina, I think that we see that with continued growth and experience, the more times he gets reps, I think you're talking about a Shedeur Sanders as a quarterback that's really going to be prepared to play in the league. Now, granted, I had to tell some other people this in several other conversations. Granted, it was a preseason game. He wasn't necessarily playing against the players he's going to be playing, once the regular season starts. But you're talking about someone who made good reads, made good decisions. It wasn't perfect, of course, but you almost have to consider giving him a chance. And when you start talking about Dillon Gabriel, not a bad quarterback as another second option as well. And I've heard so much discussion, like, well, especially more so on Twitter, you hear people talking about, Dillon Gabriel, he's nothing compared to Shedeur Sanders. Like, this dude, like, let's not forget what he did in college, right? Yeah. Like, he's not a slouch at all. It just so happens to be that he's behind a guy by the name of Shedeur Sanders. That's what it really comes down to. And so I think that the safe bet, if you're Coach Kevin Stefanski right now, is to go with Joe Flacco because he has the experience. But I'm hoping that Shedeur gets the start at some point during the season.
I think it's good. I think it's Shedeur's been saying, his Nike ad, whatnot. It's only a matter of time. I think it's definitely the right call to start Flacco. I think starting experience is going to be great. I thought Shedeur having an experienced leader, somebody who had been there and done that, like Joe Flacco, has been there, won a Super Bowl, was a Super Bowl MVP. People forget. People who don't write Joe Flacco off because he's 40 and whatnot. He's been there and done that. So I think I understand also Joe Flacco doesn't want to be like mentoring, so to speak. I think it's more of a lead by example situation with Joe Flacco and Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel for that perspective. With Dillon Gabriel coming in the scene here, I think it's they're going to roll with him first. If Joe Flacco struggles, they're going to put Dillon Gabriel in first just because they drafted him first. And I was a big, Dillon Gabriel guy in college. He's bounced around, played a lot of football. He's broken. I think he has the FBS record for passing yards or passing touchdowns, I believe. And I get that. I just think that Shedeur is going to find his way onto the field eventually because I think Dillon Gabriel could struggle, especially if he has to play early in the Browns' first 6 games, which their schedule is a gauntlet early. So that's something to watch in the Browns quarterback situation. Now, as we look this Saturday, I want to get your thoughts on what to expect really in the Browns' final preseason game here. Joe Flacco's play about 25 plays. Then we'll get to see a little bit of Gabriel, a little bit of Shedeur, and really it's a dress rehearsal here, kind of the last preseason game. So I don't know if there's too much to look ahead to. But what do you expect on Saturday here for the Browns' final preseason match before we get into some college football talk?
So when I hear dress rehearsal, I feel like each one of these quarterbacks are going to obviously do their best to have their best performance in the limited time that they have on the field. But that also tells me decisions have already been made. And at the end of the day, when week 1 hits, Joe Flacco will be under center as the starter. However, if your name is Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, could potentially be deciding or determining, okay, who's going to come in at second just in case if something was to happen to Joe Flacco. Who's going to be behind Flacco or who's going to be third string. So if you're Gabriel or you're Sanders, you're trying to have your best football in this particular game, albeit that it's a dress rehearsal. You want to make sure you end on a high note because obviously, with coaches, you're trying to impress them and, get a spot on the team. But then also, with the Cleveland Browns, just like I know, the chatter will begin even more after this final game on Saturday. So you want to make sure that you're playing your best ball. And I think both of them are going to have their best games on Saturday.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited to see how both of them play in just the similar setting here. I don't know how many starters will be out with them. At that point, it's going to be kind of interesting to see who they play with and how they respond. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But I think ultimately going back to Kenny Pickett and then Huntley, who I interviewed Mary Kay Cabot, she indicated he's more of like a camp body to fill in for injuries, not to put it lightly. But I expect him to be. I expect them to move on from him. I just don't see them rostering 4 quarterbacks. Kevin Stefanski's been pretty open about that as well. So something to watch here on Saturday.